This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Struggles with logistics have been a challenge for every industry. Might they soon be coming to an end? Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson in the studio today, and we are going to talk about those logistics challenges first. Joining us right away is Mike Steenhoek from the Soy Transportation Coalition. Mike, export sales this past week, we saw a pretty good number for soybeans. 2.2 million soybeans were shipped out last week. Is that telling us that the Gulf export facilities are all back online?
Well, we've been really happy to see that rebound, and obviously Hurricane Ida was a big gut punch to the Gulf of Mexico, and that there has been a considerable time of recovery for that, particularly getting power to these facilities. There still remains particularly one facility that had incurred some significant damage that still needs to recover from that. But again, the bottom line is we're happy to see those facilities, that supply chain operating closer to full throttle. It's really an opportune time given the fact that we've got our harvest online and our export season is really in full season now.
It certainly is. Those combines are running. Beans are coming out of the field. Mike, as you look to the West Coast, there's been a lot of struggles with port backlogs at Long Beach and L.A. Have there been any changes to that? Are we seeing some improvement?
It's still very congested, and I wish this is something that could be resolved in a matter of minutes or hours, but this is something that's going to be with us for the considerable future, well into 2020, throughout 2021 and into 2022. This particular congestion at the West Coast, that really has an impact on containerized shipping. And so those exporters for soybeans and other agricultural products who utilize these 20 or 40 foot long steel boxes, these containers, are really being adversely affected by this. So this is something that clearly is an area of concern for our industry.
Now, I know President Joe Biden has worked to get those ports moving to a 24-hour schedule. Is that going to make much of a difference?
Well, we're hopeful it'll provide some degree of relief. I think it's important to really ground ourselves in the reality that we've got an overly subscribed supply chain that is experiencing stress at each link, whether it's the ports, whether it's the ocean vessels, whether it's the railroads, trucking, barges. Each link is really experiencing that. And so to alleviate or mitigate pressure at one link in the supply chain, that's nice, but it's simply you've got the other links that are overly subscribed as well. So that's the real concern.
Well, you mentioned the railroads. Of course, railing our products from the Midwest to the ports is a huge business. Have we been seeing elevators able to secure the cars they need?
Yeah, I mean, overall it's gone well, but again, you've got a lot of challenges confronting both rail and some of these other industries, and one of them in the United States is a shortage of workers. And these transportation companies, they're now competing more and more with other industries like construction, retail, distribution. All of these other industries are experiencing a shortage of workers. And so now these transportation providers are having to compete with that. And for a lot of folks, they don't want to have a job where they're gone from home considerable periods of time. And so you could argue that our supply chain dilemma is largely a labor shortage issue. Obviously, there's many things that are contributing to it, but I think labor is clearly one of the biggest causes of this challenge.
And Mike, if labor is the challenge, it's probably going to cost more money to get those workers to come into this field. Is that going to bake higher freight costs into more permanence for agriculture?
Yeah, that's something that money gets passed on to somebody, whether it's the customer or a decreased price offered to farmers in the case of agriculture. It needs to be recovered somewhere. And so that's clearly something that we should expect when you see that inflationary pressure on wages. Expect to see a higher price at the shelves. We're seeing that right now, and I unfortunately will probably continue to see that for the foreseeable future.
Mike, you mentioned truckers being in short supply. So many folks in agriculture have their CDL or own their trucks. Is there room here for farmers to make additional money hauling freight?
That's something that a lot of farmers have done and continue to do and continue to explore. Obviously, taking the step from just hauling your own grain to actually doing it for hire, all of a sudden there's additional compliance costs associated with that, additional hoops you have to jump through, purchasing more insurance than it's if it's just for your own operation. So a lot of farmers, they're considering that and asking the question, well, is it worth jumping through all these hoops if you can get that additional revenue? And some farmers have said yes, they're willing to do that. Others have said they don't have the appetite for it. But that's clearly an opportunity for a number of farmers, something they obviously have to do a lot of due diligence to make sure it's the right fit for them.
They certainly do. Well, Mike Steenhoek from the Soy Transportation Coalition, we certainly appreciate you keeping an eye on these issues, and thanks for giving us an update this week.
Thank you, Mike. Always a pleasure.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. Those supply chain disruptions and labor shortages have impacted nearly every market. And to talk about markets this week, Dennis Smith from Archer Financial Services is here with me. Dennis, how are shipments coming in the meat business?
We're getting shipments so far, meat out of the country, and we're learning that a lot of meat is going through the Oakland port, sort of bypassing some of the problem areas. So far, meat shipments are doing very well. Pork shipments, as far as pork exports, are down significantly for the year. Beef exports are record large, and that part of the industry is booming right now.
Well, let's talk about those exports a little bit. Dennis, when you see those exports at record large pace, where are they going?
Well, we've got China now the number 3 beef purchaser, U.S. beef buyer from the U.S., and this is all new business. A year and a half ago, China was not buying any U.S. beef. There's a ban on Brazilian beef. The Chinese will not accept Brazilian beef because of a BSE problem in early September. That ban is indefinite. We don't know when it will be lifted. There's problems between China and Australia. The U.S. beef producers are in a really good position here, and it's possible by middle of next year, China could be our #1 beef export destination.
Who would they be overtaking to reach that top spot?
Well, you've got Japan and Mexico and South Korea. Those are your big export customers, and now throw China into the mix. Beef exports are up over 20% this year.
Dennis, when you're hearing that kind of growth, 20% growth year over year, that's got to drive some enthusiasm for those deferred months in the live cattle business, does it not?
You bet. And this is coupled with a massive cow cull. Beef cows are being liquidated. They have been all summer because of drought mostly, but it's also a Canadian issue. The Canadian beef producer is also liquidating beef cows. So this is a real positive environment that we're building toward.
Well, and I think that's the key. We're building towards it, but Dennis, it has been a long time in coming. In the short term, what are you watching for an upside price target here on that live cattle?
Well, we think that we could see a 130 price target really quickly here. Call it a 124, 125 market right now. I think cattle this week are going to trade a 124 in the southern plains. I think 130 is very realistic, possibly by Thanksgiving.
All right, if we get 130 on the fat cattle side, where does that put feeders given the volatility we're seeing in the corn market?
Well, the feeder market, it's going to be interesting, Mike. If the feeder trade begins to become comfortable with the corn situation and not concerned about rising corn prices, we're going to have a sharp rally in the feeder cattle market.
Well, a sharp rally, Dennis. How far could this rally go?
Well, my measurement has the front month feeders as 190 to 200. They're currently about 160.
Now, I think back, almost a decade to 2013, 2014, feeder cattle rallied, went north of that $200 mark. Do you see that happening again?
I do. I think we've got a strong rally in feeders. It's going to take some time, but with the reduced cow numbers, reduced beef inventory, lower production, rising exports, strong domestic demand, the table is set for a huge rally.
When do you see that potential for 190, 200 in the feeder market coming? Is that wait till spring?
It's hard to say. Lots of times the futures markets react so much quicker than you expect. I think this could all be in place. That target could be reached sometime in the first quarter.
First quarter 2022, does domestic demand have to stay strong to get us there?
You bet. We need the domestic demand. There's no doubt about that.
Lots of things happening in the meat market. Dennis, when we return, we will talk about pork. So stay with us here on This Week in Agribusiness. And we're back talking meat markets with Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services. Dennis, labor shortages have been a problem for the meatpacking industry for several years, but they've intensified during the coronavirus pandemic. How are pork processors dealing with the labor shortage?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. One of the things we are just now picking up on is the huge volume trade that's occurring in the heavyweight bone-in hams. These hams are priced now on either side of 50 cents a pound, which is historically very cheap. The volume has really spiked here in the last couple of weeks. We believe that these hams, the bone-in ham product, is going to Mexico, where they will process them further, take the bone out, and then a large portion of those hams is likely to come right back into the U.S. That's one way to deal with the labor problem.
Instead of bringing the labor to the product, take the product to the labor.
Exactly.
Dennis, if that's the case, if we're finding ways around these labor shortages, do you think there is upside coming in this hog market?
Yeah, I'm very bullish the hog market. Seasonal low timing coming around early November. The U.S. pork producer has been culling the sow herd fairly aggressively. That was verified in the most recent hog and pig report. I think that will continue and be confirmed on the next hog and pig report due out at the end of the year. We have China in a massive liquidation phase. They have got a disaster on their hands. Spain is liquidating sows. Germany's liquidating sows. Basically, every pork exporter, with the exception of Brazil, is cutting the breeding stock, and this will have a big impact, say 6, 8, 10 months down the road.
Now, when you say a big impact, I mean, we only have to think back to early this summer to see hog prices north of $100 a hundredweight. Dennis, are those prices potentially coming back?
Yeah, that market kind of got killed by the slowdown in change speed. That's exactly when the cash hog market last summer topped out. The hog futures, 120, 123, and I think that's where the 22 hog summer, the June 22, July 22, in my opinion, they're headed toward 120.
Well, I know the Biden administration has made some moves to letting packing plants increase their chain speeds yet again. Is that a precondition for seeing those prices return?
Yeah, we need to see some of these issues hammered out. We need to see some relief, some labor relief. We're seeing that there's solutions, partial solutions being rectified right now. We need some relief as far as the chain speed to help this along, but fewer numbers is going to solve the problem.
Well, it certainly would. And if we've got fewer numbers and we still have very strong domestic demand and that export demand should pick up, Dennis, other than China, what other potential markets exist for U.S. pork around the world?
Well, we've got pork going all over the world. South America, almost every country in South America is now readily a pork customer. Of course, the traditional Japan, Mexico with hams, and China, the big one. They are cutting back severely right now. They have overproduction right now. They're liquidating huge numbers of hogs. The talk is every hog producer in China is losing $200 per hog. That's not going to last. I think in 6, 8 months from now, China will be back in a big way in the U.S. pork market.
Inflation concerns, Dennis, is this going to lift all boats in the meat sector?
Yeah, the rising tide will lift all boats. This whole inflationary environment is very friendly toward the meat prices and, of course, toward the live cattle and live hog prices. You bet.
Lots of things to watch. Could be some fireworks as this year moves forward.
You bet. It's going to be a good year.
It certainly will. Dennis Smith from Archer Financial Services. Stay with us.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Chad Colby joins us next with his tech segment, and ordinarily when Chad joins us, we can expect to see something flashy, new laptop, new drones, new handheld tools on the farm, but innovation also happens to some of the more humble implements on the farm.
Hi everyone, I'm Chad Colby, and you know me, I love talking about innovations. And this week we're going to talk about the hitch pin of all things. This is called the Quick Pin. It was invented by a young man who's going to Kansas State University, and Blake Chance came up with this because he felt the need and had this issue on his farm. And what happens is you take that clip out and the top of the pin just comes apart. Now this isn't very expensive, it's $30, okay? It's easy to use, you can see me demonstrating it right here for you. But you know, when I grew up, I actually had a custom round baling business, and I had a couple fires actually on my baler. And this was a conversation my dad had because you could not pull the pin out, A, because it could be pinched in there, and also you had interference from the drawbar. With the Quick Pin, you pull that top off, you move the tractor a little bit, the pressure releases, and the pin drops out. Now this could be used in a lot of different ways. But I like what Blake did here. I saw this video on YouTube, and I just wanted to share with you and demonstrate how you can use the Quick Pin to get the tractor quickly disconnected and away from any fires like you would see right here. This is a really powerful video because this is the real world right here. And you can see how as he jumps out of the tractor, he pulls the top off that pin. He's going to jump in the tractor, the pressure will fall off, the pin drops out, and he drives away and protects that tractor. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this or buying some of these for your farm, you can go to quickpinhitchpin.com, and they make them in various sizes. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. It's cool to see innovation coming to something as simple as a hitch pin. Later on in the show, we'll talk about the innovation coming to dairy as Max talks with Dr. Scott Bascom about how that industry is modifying their rations to keep their dairy cows healthier and happier. Stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Harvest season is going on across the country. Corn and soybeans are coming out across the Midwest, and down in Georgia, peanut harvest is underway. That's not the only thing going on in Georgia. Last week, the Sunbelt Ag Expo happened, and Willie Vogt, an executive director with Farm Progress, was down there. Willie, how was the Sunbelt Ag Expo this year?
You know, Mike, I have to say, best weather at Sunbelt in recent memory. Being in South Georgia, you get a range of weather at this time of year. But this year the highs were in the low 80s, breeze, nice breeze to keep the gnats off, no humidity. Best days I've been to Sunbelt in a while. Now,
they do have weather challenges down there. Willie, was there any concern that weather might throw a wrench into the show this year?
Absolutely. They've had 70 inches of rain since January, and 40 of those inches fell since June. As the Chip Blaylock, the show manager, will tell you, it was kind of a question as to what the crops would look like for their cotton demo and their hay demos, but they were able to pull them off, and they had some good stuff in the cotton field too, so it was interesting.
Well, let's talk about what they had in the cotton field. Willie, you saw some new equipment that was unveiled, I understand, for the first time at Sunbelt.
Yeah, the world premiere of the new John Deere CP770 cotton picker was rolled out there. Deere has pretty much a predominant position in cotton picking these days. This new machine has a lot of enhancements for productivity, cuts the amount of wrap needed. There's a lot of features and efficiency features in it. But I think for a lot of cotton guys who have been running Deere, more recent model Deere pickers, they're going to like that new cab because this machine's got the X9 cab, or the cab you find on the new 9R tractors. A big improvement.
It is. Were the growers you were talking with down there excited to get in there and take a look at it?
Oh, yes. And they only had one. They didn't even have it on the exhibit stand. They had it in the field. They don't have many built yet. So it was out in the field, but the field demos were busy and people could see it. And there was an opportunity to crawl in the cab and check it out, which is really nice. And then they had a couple of sample bales in the exhibit area too. Good. And across the whole show this year, there was a lot of interest, a lot of people on hand. Lines were long at food areas, which is always your indication of how many people are at a show. So it was a good show this year.
Willie, I think about the Farm Progress Show and Husker Harvest Days. Autonomy was a huge theme at those shows. Did you see that have a similar impact down there at the Sunbelt Show?
That's not as big an issue down here, partly because of the diversity of the crops. We didn't have any autonomy on display that I saw. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of machinery there and equipment, but it's because of the diversity. Like you said, you mentioned peanuts, but the pecan harvest has started, the cotton harvest has started. And so they're really focused on those kinds of equipment. And I'm not seeing a lot of automation there yet, but I'll tell you what, it won't be long.
It won't be long, and I imagine labor-saving technologies were still probably a big hit. Have they been having a problem with labor down in Georgia and the Southeast more broadly?
I think everywhere is having a problem with labor. And I think that's one of the issues. You know, when you look at cotton harvest and how it's evolved to being one machine doing the whole job versus the 4 or 5 it used to take, that's driving a lot of people to look at new pickers and look at new technology for sure. And also larger equipment, looking at maybe a bigger tractor to do the work of two, things like that. We're seeing those kinds of conversations.
You know, Willie, precision agriculture has just been going gangbusters across the Corn Belt. Were you seeing similar applications of precision technology for peanuts or pecans or cotton down at the Georgia show?
Well, they have all that technology available for cotton, and I think they have more and more technology for peanuts and pecans. We had a group of the Farmer of the Year group. We did a meeting with them. I run a roundtable with that group, and there was a lot of conversation there about how they've engaged precision ag and how they're learning to bring that data together. It's a little slower down there. You know, all the concentration on precision ag for broadacre crops was corn and soybeans, and now they're bringing it into cotton, and that area has been pretty big. So the other crops will come along too, I think.
Well, you mentioned the Farmer of the Year, and of course the Swisher Southeast Farmer of the Year program is a part of Sunbelt, or at least held in conjunction with it. Tell us what you learned.
Well, first of all, I learn something every time I go there because I get to spend quality time with the each year's group of winners. There are 10 states that pick a Farmer of the Year each year, and then they're judged. And I mean, a crew of judges go to their farms, and then out of the 10, one is chosen as the Southeast Farmer of the Year. This year it was Bob, I've got to pull my notes, but it was Robert Martin Hall, or Bob Hall, and he's out of South Carolina, a very diversified operation. But if you look at the list of the top 10, I mean, we had the world's largest bait fish farm. They serve 44 states. If you're buying bait fish, you're buying from them. I mean, those are the kinds of people that were chosen as Farmers of the Year from each of their states. Very interesting.
It is. And do you remember what kind of diversification Mr. Hall had on his farm?
Well, it's a lot of vegetables, and he sells into the direct market, and that's really good for them. And it's kind of interesting. It's a little smaller farm than you'd think, but a very focused farm on family and growing the operation. Absolutely.
Willie, were growers broadly optimistic looking ahead to this next year? Have higher prices trickled down into some of those diversified operations there in Georgia?
They have, and especially with the pandemic changes and the need to buy food locally and make sure you have local sources. But let's remember, cotton's over $1, and cotton hasn't been over $1 in a lot of people's living memory. I mean, really, it has been that long. And so there's a good mood down there, just as well as with beans and corn where it is, because there's a lot of soybeans and corn in that area too. Certainly.
A lot of different aspects to agriculture down in Georgia. Willie, thanks for this update on the Sunbelt Ag Expo.
Thanks very much, Mike. Take care.
And folks, stick with us. Those higher prices that have been percolating through the ag economy have been causing some farmers to change their mind. Later on in the program, we'll talk about how growers might be making some adjustments to their 2022 input schedule when we return on This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Thanks for joining us on This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio, and for the past several months, we have talked about jumps in commodity prices. We've seen it, of course, in the agricultural commodities, but we're also seeing it in the energy commodities, which includes crude oil and natural gas, two key components for making fertilizer on the farm. Farmer Matt Foes talked about how this change might impact his operation in 2022 when it comes time to get in the field.
So besides trying to survive 2021, which is awesome right now with all the rain and down corn and such, looking forward into 2022, input pricing is got to take some attention right now. So as we look at what the year-over-year input increases are likely to be, we need to think about, one, how much we need, and two, how and we apply it so that we get the most bang out of what bucks we do spend on inputs.
Matt emphasized how getting the right product in the right place is going to be very important in a year when input prices are as high as they might be in 2022. But even more than that, it might be important to reconsider the rotation on the farm.
If I look at the input prices that I'm expecting to see going into next year, I'm probably going to shy away from much corn on corn. So peel back and do more of a 50-50 rotation with corn and soybeans. That's a given at this point in time. The other thing I'm doing is I'm making sure I have fresh soil tests on every field. If I didn't take them last year on half the acres, I'm going to take them this year, because I want to know exactly what I've got in the bank. They always say, oh, apply more fertilizer. It's like money in the bank. Well, at this point in time, with the fertilizer prices we're looking at, might be a good idea to think about a withdrawal from that bank account.
That was Matt Foes, Illinois farmer, and a good reminder that even when returns are good on the farm, it's never too early to start sharpening those pencils for the next growing season.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
It's time to take a look at the weather. Greg Solier joins us. And Greg, looking out at the Pacific Northwest, latest drought monitor showed a little bit of improvement.
Yeah, to the western areas. And I think with time, the western states will, with time, see a categorical improvement or two to the drought monitor across the west. Or actually from about the plain states on westward. Not the way the entire winter season, mind you, and fall season is going to go, but it is of significance. Hopefully does not get out of control. There'll be some wind issues, no less than 3 more of these weather systems offshore to come into the Pacific Northwest. Ahead of them, you build the jet northward, you get some mild air and some additional moisture, primarily all in the form of liquid form. Yes, we've seen a couple of snow events the past couple of weeks here, but lowest elevations will be rain, so we get recharge going. You're kind of doing the old whole Jekyll and Hyde thing. You want to get moisture to the ground this time of the year, but harvest completion as well. Another big buckle here over the middle late portions of the week into Northern California, Pacific Northwest coastal regions, some brief dry time interior west, and windy dry weather, mild weather across the northern and central plains. That downward Chinook flow, this west to east flow, generates sinking air and warmth across the northern plains. There is absolutely no cold air inside anywhere east of the divide anytime soon. Here's the first weather system making its way all the way into Southern California with a couple of showers anticipated. Showers, couple of thunderstorms across the central Rockies. No real significant snow, way too high on the warmth and high freezing levels as well. Wind and some showers and thunderstorms, much needed, welcome, beneficial as well for the central and south end of the winter wheat belt over the early to middle parts of the week. We get a bit of a break here across the Four Corners into the plains. No cold air in sight. Saw the first frost for a while, and it's been late in arriving. 2 weeks delayed across the Great Plains areas. Note the buckle back into California. Another pickup on these weather systems, Mike. Again, second or third in a row to come our way here the next 10 to 15 days.
Well, Greg, turning our focus over to the Corn Belt, harvest has been running well ahead of pace this year. Is that going to continue?
I think we have delays here probably for the next 7 to 10. There's some showery weather building back into the forecast. As you see in the extended outlook, though, as we get deeper and even to the beginning part of November, opportunities galore to resume harvest operations. We're balancing moisture gain and harvest. But we've got plenty of opportunities across the upper Midwest for harvest early in the week. But some wet weather central and southern Corn Belt. Here comes this system out of the divide, setting up across the plains. Gulf moisture and a big dip in the jet stream. Widespread showers and thunderstorms northern and western Corn Belt. Still some opportunity late portion of the week for our eastern areas of the complex. Note the lack of cold air. Maybe highest elevation see a brief transition over to some snow. Down through the Rio Grande, couple of thunderstorms and some heat. Through the Delta region, some shower activity anticipated. A couple of outbreaks as well. Red River Valley of the South. Later on to the week, here comes this buckle in the jet, and with it a strong cold front. Look at the severe aspects here, but nonetheless additional rounds of showers and thunderstorms and additional moisture gain and drought improvement for parts of the central and southern winter wheat belt later in the week.
Greg, do these higher than average winter temps or fall temps extend all the way to the East Coast?
Now, they certainly do. You know, no cold air, and it's a 200-mile-an-hour jet stream across the Pacific, locking the cold air into the western part of the hemisphere and up along the Canadian Rockies and points westward. We'll keep an eye on it, mind you, because I think it'll be the other boot end or hoof that drops all of a sudden, practically from a summertime to fall setup, quickly into winter, but we're still weeks away. What weather? Some delays in the harvest scene, central and southern Corn Belt. Windy, cool weather for parts of the Northeast and New England. Here comes this low and a secondary strong cold front and a dip in the jet. So yeah, there'll be some harvest delays with widespread moisture building west to east across the Corn Belt, middle to late portions of the week. Some opportunities for outdoor work in fall colors into the Northeast and New England. Showers and thunderstorms delta back into the southeastern part of the country. We've made good advance on harvest operations and will continue to do so here in this part of the country. Wet weather delays later in the week back west towards the Mississippi.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
We're talking weather with Greg Solier. And Greg, let's talk about precipitation next week. Where and when?
Well, plenty of it in the Pacific Northwest and a fair amount as well. Yes, there will be harvest delays, but we've had another broadening of opportunity and more to come in the harvest sense here when we get deeper into the long-range forecast for the month of November. And the tropical pressures are a little bit low and lowering still for this calendar date in this part of the country, or at least the Gulf, I should say. So this part of the country needs to be watched for additional tropical moisture. It will feed northward. Yeah, there'll be some wind, watch the stalks, etc., lodging potential, and an inch or two spread over about 7 days or so through the plains and Corn Belt locales, ultimately towards the weekend here. Here's the rain snow line. No cold air in sight. That cold air well to the north, but filtering into parts of the western states, highest peaks above maybe 7,000 feet snow. Look at the wind and the moisture, at least an inch or two or more, probably upwards of 5 to 8 across higher elevations of the Pacific Northwest as the week wears on.
Do these warmer temps continue into that first week of November?
They continue on. Here it is. Easy on the certainly heating bill and at least oil consumption as well. That's good news considering all the market rises and spikes in pricing. Here is the warmth across the heartland, a little bit below average here, a bit below average across parts of the Pacific Northwest. And note that jet stream pattern roaring across northern and central California into the upper Midwest and points out of these. So you get into the early part of November, yes, some potential harvest delays, but moisture recharge here in the drought areas. Watch the tropics down here and more moisture too for Northern California, the Pacific Northwest with dryness and drought in mind.
Do temperatures start to moderate at all the week of November 8th through the 14th?
We are stuck as long as this jet stream out of the Gulf of Alaska roars and curls through the Gulf of Alaska into the Pacific Northwest and rises through the Canadian prairie. All the Arctic air is bottled up here. We'll keep an eye on it here in the weeks to come. Look at the warmth across the heartland, still a bit below average here and into California, the Pacific Northwest, where the moisture pattern continues on. Yeah, we can still get something to cook in the tropics down here this time of the year, above average across the Gulf Coast. Here is your harvest opportunity heading into the first half, or at least the second week of the month of November, drying out across much of the plains and Corn Belt locales too.
How do things look the week of November 15th, Greg?
Enjoy the warmth. It continues on. Look at here. Maybe a little dip and some slight cooling into the northeast of New England. The warmth is certainly dominant for the plains, Corn Belt locales as well, building back through Texas, just a bit below average across the valleys of California from a moisture standpoint. And we continue to be busy through Northern California, sections of the southwestern sections of the country here, a little bit on the wetter side. Look at the dry time. More harvest opportunities across the Corn Belt, the plains, southeastern part of the country. And it looks like precip, including a little snow, back in the forecast for far northern sections of New England.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Well, there's a little advice at Max's Tractor Shed this weekend. If you're looking for that special tractor that was in the family at one time, don't you dare give up. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. The farmer at World Dairy Expo asked me if they're really as good as I say they are. Well, to be honest, my description falls short of the mark. They are even better. Find out more about Store Lock Tool Cabinets at storelock.com. Greg Walker was sitting down across the table from me a few years ago talking about that tractor that his dad and granddad had used. He wanted to get it back. I said, be patient, be persistent, keep after it. It was a 1952 Farmall M. Greg says it was probably the last one delivered by International Harvester to Burlington, North Carolina. That M was used by his dad and granddad on the dairy farm. Then in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, Greg drove it. Growing up, helping produce the flu-cured tobacco crop. Well, it got out of the family. But Greg knew where it was. He remembered Max Armstrong saying, "Keep after it." That paid off, Greg said. At his office in Raleigh one day, the call came from the old man who had the Farmall. He was ready to let go of it. Greg said he just about cried over that. Greg and a good buddy got it running again. Mr. Ray Smith restored it. That tractor that his grandfather, John Robert, had back in the day. J. Robert, they called him. And Greg Walker said he finds himself every now and then referring to that tractor as J. Robert, the 1952 Farmall in North Carolina. Well, crossing the block of the week ahead at Big Iron, there'll be construction equipment, farm equipment, some trucks. Let's get the rundown from Mr. Mark Stock.
October 27th, Max, we've got over 960 items selling. The Bonnie J. Funk retirement sale in Hillsboro, Kansas features a Case IH Magnum 225 mechanical front tractor. We also have a Unifirth four-wheel grain cart. Garst Supply Company, they are retiring and they're selling items out of Coon Rapids, Iowa. They've got a John Deere 750 dozer, a John Deere 6145R mechanical front tractor with a loader. It's a 2017 model with only 1,444 hours. They have a John Deere 750 no-till drill. The Virgo Hayer Estate will have 30 items. They're out of Ainsworth, Nebraska. They've got a MacDon 9250 swather, a Titan 18-foot livestock trailer, John Deere 4230 tractor, plus a Kenworth W900 semi-truck tractor. They've also got a John Deere 3020 tractor that will sell. So a lot of outstanding equipment selling in the last week of October. Plus, Max, we've got 23 farms that will be sold in October and November on BigIron.com. So if you're buying or selling, visit BigIron.com for more information. If you're looking for land, Big Iron Realty will be selling 23 farms in Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Colorado, and Missouri over the next few weeks. Go to the Big Iron website for more specific information.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide. We stand for you.
This Week in Agribusiness is proud to continue our salute to FFA, and we're getting to know the members of the state officer team for the state of Indiana. Joining us this week is Courtney Otte. She is the 2021-22 Indiana FFA State President. Courtney, what are you excited about in this upcoming year?
I'm definitely looking forward to our business and industry visits that happen later in the year. Not only is that going to allow my teammates and I to kind of figure out where we're wanting to go in life, but it's really going to allow us to connect with different avenues within agriculture that we don't get to exactly see on a daily basis.
It is nice to have that opportunity, and I imagine, Courtney, you're going to get to share that enthusiasm with students at conferences throughout the year as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. We're actually getting ready to dive into our next conference, which is FIRE, or Foundations in Reaching Excellence, and that's for our older high school members.
And will you be having a lot throughout the year, or has COVID still kind of kept active participation down?
It's definitely kept it down a little bit. We're at a max capacity of around 100, but we're still fulfilling all 8 of our conferences. So we're extremely excited for that and just glad that we could have an event in person.
What was it that prompted you to get involved in FFA in the first place, Courtney?
Yeah, so growing up, I was actually fully convinced that FFA was the adult version of 4-H. So it was kind of like a no-brainer, and I told myself that of course I would join it. But once I got into middle school, my advisor immediately pulled me in for the creed speaking contest. And since then, I just really haven't looked back. And I continued to do more and more contests. And then one day I was at a conference and I saw all these members interacting with the state officers, and actually found out that the members leave more impacts on the state officers than the state officers do on the members. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to create such an inspiring moment for members that now I'm here.
Now you're here. Courtney Otte going to Purdue when she's finished her year of service to continue her career in agriculture. We're proud to salute the FFA.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
Agriculture is never without its daily challenges, but I want to talk about one this week that affects all of us in and out of agriculture, the forest fire challenge, and I do that through the words of California 1st District Congressman Doug LaMelfa, a fourth-generation rice farmer. He recently said this in remarks on Capitol Hill, and let me quote, "I want to begin by recognizing our firefighters on the ground who risk their lives every day to confront these disasters head on. To our firefighters, I say thank you for your selfless dedication to protecting our family and friends, our homes and communities, and our forests." He went on to say these past few years have been incredibly difficult for my district and many rural forested regions. Last year, we saw over 10 million acres burn, over 40% of those in California alone. We know there are some 63 million acres at medium to high risk of wildfires, and at least 80 million acres of Forest Service land in need of treatment. And although the challenges before the Forest Service are many, the solutions that we must put into practice to prevent catastrophic wildfires are clear and well established. Many continue to blame a changing climate for the increase in acres burned each year and the greater intensity of recent wildfires. The fact is, most of our forests are overgrown and overstocked. And he concluded, wildfires are a national emergency. Yet we will not solve this crisis without a fundamental shift in how we manage our forest lands. Some wise words from the congressman. Be safe, be well. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Coming up next on This Week in Agribusiness, dairy farmers modify their rations to improve their herd health and herd happiness. Stay tuned. In agriculture, we have a lot of data coming at us each and every week, and USDA is a prime source of that data. They're known for compiling reports on all the different industries that comprise agriculture, and one person who's a big fan of seeing what the USDA is producing is our very own Max Armstrong. He's been keeping an eye on several of those reports, and he brings us an update on one of them.
I find it interesting, Mike, looking at those milk production totals from month to month to see what the dairy industry is doing in terms of the output per cow, the total numbers of cows milked, and the total milk production coming out of the major producing states. And one thing we heard at World Dairy Expo a few weeks ago was that not every milk producer these days is looking to just produce more milk. Dr. Scott Bascom with Fibro Animal Health talked with me about that.
We have customers now that have a harder time finding a market for their milk. Many of them are even under quota, that they can only sell so much milk. So we've seen a shift. Our customers are not typically interested in hearing about how they can make more milk. So we look at things that help them have healthier animals, more efficient animals, perhaps reduce antibiotic use because animals are healthier. Of course, healthier animals are more productive and more efficient in that way. But a lot of our customers are wanting to make more money producing the same pounds of milk, which is a different way of thinking than we would have talked about last time we met in 2019 at World Dairy Expo. That, then increasing production was an important strategy for our customers. Still is for many of them, but there's a growing number that isn't their strategy. So we've really gone back to our cores at High Fiber. We focus on healthy animals and ultimately healthy food and healthy people and a healthy world. And so we've really put a lot more emphasis on animal health, improving the health of our customers' animals so they're more efficient, more productive. Not necessarily more pounds of milk sold off the farm, but maybe it's a couple of fewer cows they're milking or just fewer problems, maybe less need for replacement heifers. It varies from farm to farm.
Dr. Bascom says, indeed, there are some things milk producers are doing to try to do a better job of producing milk, not just producing more milk.
I saw a picture of a cow that my grandfather had in the 1950s, a Holstein cow he was proud of. I don't know why. She was ugly as all get out. She made 8,000 pounds of milk, and he was proud of her. Well, today we see top Holstein cows making 50, 60,000 pounds of milk. So all those little details matter, right? And that's where our opportunity is. It's that little improvement that maybe wasn't a big deal to my grandpa in the 60s, is a big deal now, and the difference between being profitable and not profitable on many farms.
Dr. Bascom says producers can target improving reproduction, limit the heat stress in their cows, and try to limit the amount of disease as much as possible too, Mike.
Thank you, Max. And over the past several years, I've heard from several dairy farmers who have been modifying their ration to improve their dairy components, notably getting that butter fat number up to make more delicious ice cream. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in this week. We'll be back next week with This Week in Agribusiness, and we look forward to all of you joining us here. In the meantime, stay safe and have a great week, everyone.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.